So we're talking about HUBSCO Plus training today, and HUBSCO Plus is the system that we use to enter data on spending with building construction. So we're talking about vertical construction. This is not goods and services. HUBSCO Plus is just the system for submitting the reports. It's not where you post solicitations. It's not where you go to search for vendors um, to say, hey, I want you to do work for me. It's just the place where you go to put in the data for the projects that you've been working on and the vendors that you used or you reached out to on those projects. So what we'll learn from this training is we'll go through an overview of the hub requirements. We may have some veterans here who know all this, but we may also have some folks who are somewhat new. We're going to go over the HUBSCO Plus features. We're going to talk about how to log into HUBSCO Plus, how to navigate HUBSCO Plus, how to add formal and informal projects. They're very similar. There are a few differences, and we typically look at the formal projects as we're going through on the screens that we run. And then we'll talk about some reports as well. And please, as we're going through this, if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat, or you can just take yourself off mute and ask your question. I would prefer that we ask the question when you have it, rather than making you wait for a break so that you don't forget it. I know I would. And we get your question answered as best we can as we're going along. So one thing that we want to start off with is a basic is, what is a hub? We talk about historically underutilized businesses, and hub is the abbreviation for that. Sometimes we talk about the hub office, and sometimes people just talk about hub as the hub office, but historically underutilized business is defined in General Statute 143, 128.4. And that definition is at least 51% of the business is owned by one or more persons who are members of at least one of the groups in identified in that statute, which are listed down below. And I'll run through those in a moment. The management and daily business operations must be controlled by at least one owner who is in one of those groups. So there are two components to certification eligibility to be considered a hub vendor, and that is ownership and control. So you can't have somebody who owns it 100% who falls into one of these categories, but they have nothing to do with running the business. They've got to be involved in that day-to-day operations. So the certification categories are Black, Hispanic, Asian American, American American Indian, female, disabled, and disadvantaged. And each company gets one certification. So they have one category that they are certified in. There may be times when somebody falls into different categories, but there's only one certification that they hold. So when it comes to looking at things, we tend to look at those top four categories first: Black, Hispanic, Asian American, American Indian. If the ownership falls into that area, that will be the category they have, and we stop there. If none of the owners fall into those categories, then we look at the other categories with female as the next one in line. So if they don't fall into those top four, then we look to see if the majority of the ownership is female. If they are, that's the certification that they hold, and we stop there. If none of the owners are in those four first categories or the female category, then we look to see if the owners are disabled or disadvantaged. And we see a lot more disabled than we do disadvantaged. We don't see a ton of either of those certification categories, but we see more disabled. So there's sometimes we get asked about veteran status, and veteran is not part of the statute. So we don't certify based on whether somebody is a veteran or not, but it is possible for veterans to be certified if they fall into one of these categories. There is also a new category called Employee Stock Ownership Plan. We're calling it ESOP for short. Nobody's actually certified in this yet. We're still working on the systems to be able to run through somebody to be able to say, hey, I want to be an ESOP, and for our system to be able to recognize it, have the documentation that we need, be able to go through that process and and approve it and have it show up on the EVP website, as well as show up in HUBSCO and other systems as well. So that is a new category. It's based on ownership of an employee stock ownership plan company. That's a sort of an IRS designation. So they have to have an IRS designated letter that they are an ESOP, and then they have to document that 51% of the owners, or it might be ownership. I think it's owners. 51% of the members participating in the plan fall into one of the categories above. Doesn't have to be a single category. It can be any combination of those to show that they are eligible for that certification. Any questions about certification? Certification does last for 4 years, and there is a recertification process. If somebody holds a certification like from a DOT, disadvantaged business enterprise, then there is a reciprocity process, which means they've already gone through somebody else's process that we trust. So they have a lot less work to do when they come to us to get Hub certified. All right. So if we don't have any questions, I'm going to go ahead and talk about Hub construction requirements. So for state building projects, there is a 10% goal for state agencies, community colleges, and public universities. Local governments have a little bit more flexibility, but anything with any state funds, and even if it's just $1, they have to have a 10% goal if their project is $100,000 or more. So so if the cost is $300,000 or more and it's paid for with local funds, but no state money, then the goal is established by the local government. And that includes projects done by a private entity on a facility to be leased or purchased by a local government. Notice and public hearing is required on the appropriate percentage goal for minority participation for building projects for that local government goal setting. And then there are some resources for goal setting by the UNC School of Government. They have guidelines for developing documentation to support minority business participation programs. So that may be useful to take a look at if you need to set a goal that's other than 10%. So what is HUBSCO Plus? As I said, HUBSCO Plus is not the same thing as the Hub program or the Hub Office or the vendor search. So HUBSCO Plus was developed by the North Carolina Hub Office and the North Carolina Department of Information Technology to allow local governments to have a dedicated method to provide reports for Hub spending on design and construction projects. And we do want to capture spending on design as well as construction. We've seen a lot more spending on design with Hub vendors on the state side in state agencies, universities, community colleges. So we think there's a little bit of a lag in local governments reporting on their design spending, but it is something that we capture and report. We don't necessarily hold it to that same 10% goal with the construction contracts are what contribute to that goal, but we do want to capture that spending because there are Hub designers and engineers and architects. So we still want to capture spending to show what is being done with them. By the way, community colleges, public universities, and state agencies use InterScope Plus. This training does not cover that, and it will not help those organizations be able to submit any reports in InterScope. So if you're from a community college, now's a good time to say, I don't need to spend my time on the rest of this training. So what to know about construction reporting? There are some projects that do need to be reported. Building projects that are $30,000 or more based on the total cost of the project need to be reported. That's building construction or repair projects. And the UNC School of Government notes that building is not defined in statute. Webster's 11th defines a building as a roofed and walled structure built for permanent use. So there are some gray areas there. If you are building a school, that brick and mortar part of the school, that definitely has to be reported. If you're building the entire complex and like a tennis court outside or a basketball court outside is something that you're covering, that can be included. If you're doing that separately, like the school is already in place and you're like, oh, you know what? We need to redo the basketball court. It's been years and it's falling apart and the pavement's all cracked. That can be done as a separate project. And since it's not a walled and roofed structure, that is something that's a little bit of a gray area that you could determine, yes, we're going to follow the rules for reaching out to hub vendors. We would encourage you to do that and to report. It's not statutorily required to do that. Some people might say, well, what about a park and you've got a shelter at the park? If you've got just a shelter with picnic tables under it, that's a gray area that you could say, should I report it? Should I not? But if you have it connected to a bathroom, where there's water, sewer, electricity, AC going on in there, that should be reported. The whole thing should be reported. So just trying to give people an idea of what kind of things should be going in here. This does apply to wastewater treatment systems, wastewater collection systems, water supply systems, or water conservation projects. It's applicable if the grant funds or loans specify the use of minority firms. So you would need to pay attention to your grant funds or loans to see if they specify that. We have set up some features in HUBSCO Plus that allow for tracking linear feet of just like piping. So that is something that's in there. So what projects do not need to be reported? If it's a prefabricated or relocatable building, they don't have to be reported, and that's like the actual building itself. Work done on site to prepare for it to be used there would be reported. So like if you need to do grading and installing sewer lines or electrical stuff to prepare that site for that building to be on there, that work done on that site would go towards that $30,000. If that work is going to be more than $30,000, then you would need to be looking to reach out to hub vendors to see if they bid on that work and then report on it. Street and utility projects are not required to be reported. So I'm talking like bridges, roads, street lamps, electrical lines running overhead. Those kinds of things would not be reported in HUBSCO Plus. Typically, this is where we get some questions. So I was just going to pause for a moment. Sounds like we don't have any questions going on, so we're going to go ahead. So reporting due dates, typically these reports should be submitted on a quarterly basis. And what is actually submitted is project by project. So you go in, if you have 5 projects and 3 of them are still going on, you don't have to worry about submitting that information at this point. But if 2 of them have been finalized, one in January, one in February, then you would enter those in to meet the Q3 deadline of April 10th. So for every quarter, the due date is 10 days after that quarter ends. So if the project is finalized during that time period, that's when that due date is, 10 days after. So for Q3, which is what we would be looking to get reports on pretty soon, that covers January through March, that's going to be due April 10th. The Q4 report covers April 1 through June 30th, and that report would be due July 10th. We do send reminders on a quarterly basis to all HubSco users. I believe 2 automated emails go out to everybody about with reminders about that. And then we usually will also send a note about training, like this training. And the dates for the report due dates are always available on the Hub Office website. And those dates do not change from year to year. So regardless of whether April 10th falls on a Saturday, Sunday, or a holiday, that is the due date. So it does pay to pay attention to when that report falls to make sure that you have enough time built into your schedule to enter that data. So good faith efforts, informal projects, the responsibility is all on the public entity. And the responsibilities that they have are to solicit minority participation, maintain a record of contractors solicited. So who did you reach out to ask to bid, whether they're hub or not? That's what we're trying to know. Document efforts to recruit minority business participation in those contracts. So you sent an email, you've made a phone call, you kept a phone log of who you were meeting up with. If you had some kind of pre-bid meeting for that, you would track that as well. Report all data and documentation of efforts to recruit minority participation to the Hub Office on completion of the project. So that's where we get that once the project is finalized, submit the data. Formal advertisement of bids is not required for informal projects. And this does apply to new construction, renovations and repairs of buildings. So it's not just we built a new building, it's also we had to change that lunchroom into a science lab or something along those lines. Or we had a major HVAC breakdown and we had to replace it. And there was a lot of work involved in that. That would be something that should be reported as well. So looking at projects that are $300,000 and above with good faith efforts, there are public owner good faith efforts involved in that. And that includes before awarding the contract, developing and implementing a hub participation outreach plan, attending the scheduled pre-bid conference, notifying interested hubs about the opportunity to bid on a project at least 10 days before bid opening. And the notice must include a description of the work with the date and time where bids are to be submitted and how to submit that. And the public entity's contact person for the project, where the bid documents can be reviewed, and any special requirements for the project. And they are encouraged to use other media likely to inform hubs of the opportunity to bid. And there are, you could post it on the Hub Office website. There are minority media outlets that you could send things to. Okay. So looking at HUBSCO Plus again, it's the system that we use to put those projects in when they're finalized. And when we log in, and there is a link on the Hub Office website to HUBSCO Plus. And if you are new to HUBSCO Plus and you've recently requested access, we should have sent you, hey, here's the link, here's your login, so you can go to the login page. So you'd enter in your user ID and your password, and you'd log in and you'd see this screen over here. And it shows what informal projects and formal projects you currently have open. If they are already closed, they will not show up here, but there will be ways that you can see them again. So some important features of HUBSCO Plus, you can now search for vendors, and that's hub or non-hub. So every vendor that is in the electronic vendor portal system is capable of being found in HUBSCO Plus. And that's about 40,000 different vendors in the system. And there's about 7,000 of them that are certified as hubs. And once you select the information about that's the vendor that I used. That information will populate in the system. It is possible that there may be somebody that you're using that is not an EVP. They are definitely not hubs if that is the case, because they have to be an EVP in order to be certified. But you can add vendors in that are not in EVP. Uh, there's also now an option for switching from formal to informal. If you mistakenly started working on a project and you thought it was a formal project, but then you realized, oh no, that was a $75,000 project. We didn't put that out, publicly for bid. We invited several people to bid on it, but they didn't submit the good faith effort documentation, all that. Then you would switch back over to the informal side. And we didn't used to have that. You used to have to create a totally new project and enter everything in again. But this allows you to keep a lot of the information that you had already entered, but it just switches over. And there's a few differences between a formal project, the fields that you have to enter, and an informal project. And you'd have to go back and make sure that you get those entered in, but it means less time having to re-enter data that you already had. So here's some tips or tricks for logging into HUBSCO, and those are available on our website. They were designed when folks were coming in and they might not have been as familiar with logging in, and they were used to saying, "Hey guys, at the hub office, I can't log in. Can you reset my password?" We can no longer reset passwords. This is HUBSCO Plus came in online in 2023. It replaced the HUBSCO system that was in place for 20 years. And in that system, we had the ability to go in and update people's passwords. Now we have a different security feature where only the person who is trying to log in can request a new password. And it's a forgot password. I'll go back a couple of pages here. So on this login screen at the bottom, there's a forgot change password. And if you get to this user ID and you put your password in and you hit login and it says that's not right, and it doesn't get you to this screen, you might want to just go ahead and say forgot change password, and it will email you something to verify that, hey, this is you actually requesting this. It'll go to your email that's in your profile in HUBSCO Plus, and you can reset your password there. But again, the hub office staff do not have the ability to reset your password anymore. If you are going in and you're trying to log in and it says that your account is locked, doesn't mean the end of the world. You just have to wait a couple hours to go back and try again. And this happened to me last week, and I had to go in and I was trying to log in. It didn't work. It said it was locked. So I had to wait a couple hours, go back in. I put my user ID in, and then I just hit that forgot password piece. And then I got the email and I reset my password. So now I can get back in again. So let us know if you're having trouble. Our guidance will probably be wait a couple hours and try again, because there's not a whole lot more than that we could do. But we could confirm your email address. We could confirm your user ID. Those things might be an issue. If you get that wrong, it could be a problem. So once you get in, there's a HUBSCO Plus inbox, and it will show all the projects for either an entity or the person who just logged in that are currently open. And the formals will be at the bottom, the informals will be at the top, and it actually shows you, hey, these are the formal projects here, so the informals are the ones above. And you can switch back and forth between, I want to see all the projects from our agency versus I want to see all the projects just from me. And that's a feature, so that if somebody leaves the organization, and this happens a lot where we don't know that they're gone, but the organization still has a need to know what they've done and make sure that the projects were finalized that they were working on. That allows somebody else who is still there to go in and say, where are all the projects that are open? Okay, that one, I need to do something about it. This screen will show you the project number, the project name, when it was created, and it will give you the option to edit it or delete it. Those things are right next to each other, but the delete feature, you don't have to worry about clicking on it once and your whole project being blown away. It will ask you, are you sure you want to delete this? This cannot be undone. So it gives you a little bit of safety there. It's like we said, it can't be undone once it's deleted, but accidentally clicking on that delete button will not just get rid of it. So usually you'll want to go in and edit a project, and you'd want that little pencil and paper icon. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about HUBSCO Plus administration, and then we're going to get into the actual data entry piece. So it feels like we're kind of moving along. We're getting to where, if you're new and you've never done this, you'll see these screens soon. So HUBSCO Plus navigation, at the top of each screen, there's this blue bar. I didn't choose the color, but I didn't object to it because it wasn't the sun faded yellow that used to be. So administration, projects, and report show up at the top, and if you hover over that, it will show a little menu right below it. So for administration, it shows public entity and then send email. And for projects, it shows main page, project inbox, those items there. And that no quarterly project submittal is there. And then you have a number of reports. If you want to hover over reports, you'll see the different reports that are available to you. So you'd hover over the thing to show the menu, and then you would click on the item that you want to actually go to. So if you want to go to search for projects, whether they're completed or not, you would hover over projects and click on search for projects and continue from there. So if you go to the system administrator screens, you hover over administration, select public entity, and then you'll be allowed to edit changes to your overall organization or the users that enter data. And you'll see it here. It shows edit here for Union County Public Schools. That's about the organization overall. And then the users over here with this little person icon with the lock, that is where you would actually go in to say who can enter the data. So if you clicked edit, you would see this information, and it's basic information about the organization, where it's located, what type of entity it is, a school system, a municipality, or county government. And then it will ask for the primary contact name and the responsible official contact name. Sometimes those are the same people, but they can be different. And they may be users or they might not. It could be that your CFO wants to be listed as the primary contact, just so they can keep up with, hey, this is a report that we have to do on a regular basis, but they might not be the person who enters the data themselves. In addition, there's also information about a minority business outreach plan. That's what MBO stands for, that it's been developed and implemented. The answer to that should be yes, but it allows you to enter no, so you can be honest about that. And then the date the plan was implemented, what the verifiable percentage goal is, and there's an option here. The 10% goal is like an overall goal, and it doesn't care which hub vendors are in there. As long as they're certified, they'll count towards that 10% goal. But there are some organizations that have set goals based on either minority status or female. So there's the option to do that here. You don't have to use it. If you're using the 10% overall, you would ignore this verifiable goal by category and just keep moving. And then there's the goal certification method, verifiable goal established date, and how it was certified as the method that you're going to use. So that goal certification method, was it based on a disparity study or historical information, or you did an assessment of uh, nearby available vendors, um, and determine the goal based on that. And then the goal certification method, maybe it's that the board um, approved it officially. Maybe it's in a policy document that you've got somewhere. That's the information that would go there. And comments is just any kind of comments that you want to include in there. Um, if you are looking to enter staff, if we go back a couple slides to right here, instead of clicking edit here and you click on users, you'll get to this screen here, the list of users, and it will show you all the users that you've got. If you are a system administrator, if you're not a system administrator, you will not see this. You will not have the ability to add new users, but system administrators can add new users. They can edit existing users, whether there's a name change, email, phone number change, or they can delete existing users. So if somebody is no longer with the organization, they could delete that user. The add and edit screens are the same. It's just that when you click add, all these fields will be blank. If you're editing, all the ones that it can show will have the information in there that it already has. Password is not visible, and we cannot, change it here. We used to be able to, but that's not a feature of HUBSCO Plus. Security, choose between either public entity user or public entity system administrator. The users can enter data and pull reports. The administrators can also do those things, but they can also add other users, edit them, and they can indicate if no projects were finalized during a quarter. A public entity user would not be able to do that. There were no projects finalized portion. And in order to do that, a system administrator would need to hover over projects, click on no quarterly project submittals. So if there's, you've got continuing projects, they're not going to be done until next year. You would come in here and click on no quarterly project submittal. It would open this field at the bottom. It would tell you what fiscal year it was and what quarter it was for, and it would tell you what organization it is. I mean, you shouldn't see an organization other than your own when you come in here. But it will tell you that they did not have any projects, formal or informal, that have been completed during that fiscal year quarter. And the system administrator would click on no projects this fiscal quarter, and it would be recorded that way. We would be able to tell that was submitted, because in our annual report, we include all the dollars that are spent by hub category and the hub percentage, but we also include how many reports were submitted. And doing this without any projects counts as a report submitted. So even if you came in here and 3 quarters out of the year you had no projects finalized, but you entered that project in quarter 1, and quarter 2, quarter 3, and quarter 4, you didn't have any projects finalized, but you came in and you did this, you would get credit for reporting for 4 quarters. So that's sort of the value of this. You do have to be a little careful about when to do this, because if you do it at the beginning of the quarter, you're not going to be able to come back. You can enter more projects, but since you've already selected this, any projects that you finalize after this during that quarter, they're not going to be counted. So you do have to be a little bit careful about when you do that. It is something that can be backed up, but it's not easy to do, and it requires bringing IT in. So if we can avoid that, that would be great. So adding formal and informal projects, here's some key tips, and we've learned this since we've started the system. Use whole numbers only. We don't need to know how many cents were in the project. Round up or down. If it's 49 cents or below, round down. If it's 50 cents or above, round up to the next highest dollar. Don't use decimal points. Enter 25,000, just 25000, rather than 25,000.00. Um, so that adding those decimals in there will cause some problems. So we're looking for whole numbers only. For adding a project, there's several different ways that you can do it from your main project inbox. On the informal projects and the formal projects, there's a button at the top right over that delete column that says add informal or add formal. So you can add them there. There's another way of doing that as well, but we may get to that later. That's probably the simplest way of doing it. This is the flow that we strongly recommend people follow when doing this. It's not strictly required this way, but there are some things you have to do first. So you have to add a formal or informal project. Then you have to add the project main data entry screen. But after you do that, you have the option to do the primary designer screen or the construction contract screen. You got to do one or the two of those next. But if it's an informal project, you may not have a designer, so you may skip that and go to construction contract screen. If you have a formal project, you're pretty sure you're going to have a primary designer. And we would recommend that you start with the designer first before you get to the construction contract. And after you enter the construction contract, you can enter which construction contractors you solicited directly. That's who you reached out to directly, not a broad broadcast of 200,000 emails. It's, hey, I picked up the phone and I called this contractor and that contractor and that contractor, or I sent a specific email inviting those people to the bid. It's just not a large, huge broadcast email. It's specifically going to specific people. And then there's also the construction contractor used. You can do that. You can skip the solicited part to go to the contractor used. Informals, you will need to do the solicited. For formals, it's optional, but so you would have the ability to say, I'm entering this contract. I'm just going to go ahead and put my contractors used in first. And then if it's a informal project, go back and do the solicited part. You can do that. We just recommend that you go in this order, that you do solicited first and then used. And then you'll have the project view, which isn't a data entry situation. It's here's all the information you've entered. So you can say, oh, I need to add something, or I need to modify that. And then you can finalize the project. So when you do get to the main data entry screen, it's going to show you a bunch of fields, and the screenshot on the left is an empty screen that you'll see as soon as you get there. And then once you enter in all the data and hit save project, what you see on the right is the result of that. It still has all those fields, and it just shows you what you've entered. There are some fields that are required, and that includes the project number, project name, location of the project, and that's the county where it's located. Total square footage is required. If you have a wastewater treatment project or water project and you're not doing a building, you're just laying pipe, then you would have 0 as your square footage, and you would just enter your total linear footage right underneath that. You do have to have an original project value when you enter this in, and you do have to answer the question about if there's state funds or not. And your options there, you can save the project and it will show you the screen on the right. You can reset it, which will keep it here, and it will erase everything that you put in, or you can cancel it, and it basically means no project was created. But once you do that, you'll see these sort of tabs at the top. And what we recommend is you work from left to right, and that kind of follows along with our suggested flow. You go from project to designer, from designer to contract, from contract to project view, and then to finalize project. And you can skip to project view anytime you want to see what's been entered. It's just that if all you've entered is the main project data, you won't have any designer or contract information to see. And you can edit this information on the main project data. You will need to come back before it's finalized to make sure the final design related services are in there and the final construction value is in there. And you do need to make sure that the dollar values here match the information on your design um, fields and your construction contract fields as well. If there's a difference, it's going to let you know that. Searching and adding for designers, um, you would go into designers, the designer tab, and you'd click add prime, new prime designer, and it would show um, a blank screen here, and it shows the company name, contact information, address, all of that. You don't have to add all of that in there. If what you want to do is just enter the company name, and I wouldn't necessarily write it all out if you're looking for Gunther International Contractors of America, I would just type Gunther, because sometimes the names that you are given or you talk to somebody about might not be um, what is officially in the EVP system. So um, just type in the minimum amount that you need to be able to find your vendor, and then you'll be given a list of all the vendors that meet that criteria, and you select them and it will populate here. So like this one, ABC Designs, was an actual vendor. It was clicked on, and all this other information here was filled in. If you're doing a search, you can add other information here to say, yeah, that's the company name and it's in New York. You could do that, but you don't really need to. I wouldn't really recommend it, but it may help you, but it may complicate things too. So try to keep it simple. If the designer is in the EVP database and you select it, it will automatically populate. If you did not find the designer you want, and this goes for construction firms as well, you would click Add New Designer. So if they weren't in the list for EVP, you would add new designer, and you would manually enter the primary designer name, type of service, discipline, um, method of solicitation, original contract value, final contract value. If you add it, it will default to an ownership category of non-minority, and the source of ownership is not applicable. If they're Hub certified, that will populate and it will show that the Hub office was the source of ownership for that. But since you're adding it and then they're not already in EVP, they're not going to be Hub certified. The list that's here is the list of all the types of services you can select for designers and the disciplines. So this screen is probably pretty valuable to refer to in the future if you're trying to say, oh, what kind of work did they do for us? These are all the options that you can select. Right. So once you do that, it will show your designer all the information that you entered in. It'll show your contract dates. And in this example, none of them were entered in. It'll show your contract value, original and final, but you would want to go back in and enter these dates before you finalize the project. It's not necessarily going to stop you from finalizing the project without it, because the designer just is not built that way to cause problems when it comes to finalizing. But it is something that would be ideally entered in. And from this screen, you can either edit this information, you can delete it and it goes away and you can't get it back, or you can add a consultant. So if you need a surveyor or something, you could add a consultant, find that surveyor in the list and select them, and it would populate that, and you would make sure that you enter in the rest of the data needed, save it, and they would show up down here underneath the designer. So looking at construction contracts for formal projects, and again, this is for formal projects, going to be very similar to informals, but it is a tiny bit different. So once you've added your project, you enter in all your project main data, and you've entered in your designer, you select contracts, and you would click add new construction contract. You enter in your HUBSCO description ID, and it might be the same as your project name, your project number. We don't have any dog in the fight about what the project number or the project name should be. That is up to you to decide. Hopefully, it's logical with the way that your system works, and hopefully the contract description will make sense as well. Maybe it's the project name, maybe it's not. Maybe it's something related to the contractor that you're using. Um, you would indicate the method of advertisement for that contract, the bid opening date, the contract date, and the notice to proceed or contract start date, and then the contract completion date. You may not have all these dates when you first enter it in, and that's okay. You will need to come back and enter it in later on once the project is ready to be finalized. We do recommend that you start with these early. And as soon as you know that a project is going to start and you've got some information to share about it, to go ahead and get it started in HubSco Plus so it's there. Okay, so we were talking about the contracts and how you have to enter in all the dates. You might not have them all at the start, but we encourage you to start entering data in the project as soon as you get it, and come back and enter in the final data as you need to. And it's possible that you may be able to finalize some of the data if, like, at the very beginning, all your site work is done. You might want to go back and say, okay, the grading was done, the excavation was done, so I'm going to finalize the parts for that. But we've still got all this framing to do and concrete to pour and painting to do, electrical and everything like that. You might not be able to do those all at the same time. But once that piece is done, you could come in and finalize for that particular vendor, and you wouldn't have to do it all on like April 9th, which can be kind of panic inducing. So I encourage you to get started early. So the contract screen, once you enter in the contract, you'll be able to see what you entered for the contract and see that, hey, there's the notice to proceed and the complete date are blank. So sometime I'm going to have to go back in and do that. But the actions that you can take related to this, you can edit this information, edit that contract. You can go to contractors solicited directly, and that's required for informals. It's optional for formal projects. Or you could go to contractors used or delete the contract. Deleting the contract deletes everything associated with it. So if it's late in the game and you've entered 20 different subcontractors and you come back in here and you delete the contract, all those subcontractors will be gone. So be careful about using delete contract. You might need to do it, but be careful with that. Once, if you want to enter in a contractor, you would select go to contractor solicited directly. This is for we reached out to a specific vendor to ask them to bid on this. So you would, under the contract screen, you would go to contractors solicited directly, and then you would add a new contractor solicited directly, very similar to the designer side, where you click on that button and it brings you to this screen. Enter your firm name that you want and click. I should be able to search for that to see that vendor, but it will automatically include the contract description that you've entered at the top of this. So the required fields here include the firm name, the address, the type of work that they're doing, the primary type of work, the date they were contacted, was a quote received, and you have that's the optional will default to no, or that option defaults to no. So it's required for informals, optional for formals. For contractors solicited directly, again, you would click on the company name and type in your company, the name that you want, click search. If it finds it, you can select it and it will populate this. Otherwise, you would have to add a new contractor solicited, and you'd go in and you'd say add new contractor, and and you would enter in that new contractor manually. Um, for for entering the ones that you use, you go to the contracts tab and select go to contractors used. So not solicited directly, but used. And select add new contractor. You'll be returned to that search feed menu for the contractors. Enter in your contractor name and select it, and it'll populate it. Otherwise, you'll have to add a new contractor if they're not on the list. One thing that we had tried to do with this is be able to pull in from the contractors solicited to this, but it wasn't something that we could technically make happen. So unfortunately, you do have to go and do this for contractors used in addition to solicited. But you don't have to enter in all the data about their address and phone number and everything like that. So hopefully that's not a huge imposition to have to do those, both on the solicited and the used side. So for once you add that contractor, this is the contractors used, it'll show the tier is 0. That means they're the prime. So in this case, S&J Construction is the prime contractor. It'll enter in all the information that you had entered in. You can go in and edit that, or you can add a subcontractor, and you can do multiple subcontractors on here. Entering the subcontractor is really very similar to adding the original contractor. It will show who they are subcontracted to, and it'll show the contract description. And then you would just go ahead and take care of the firm name. If you selected somebody out of state, it wants to know why. It doesn't necessarily mean you can't use somebody out of state. It just asks the question. Again, it'll ask primary type of work. It'll ask for the original contract value and the contract date. So everything here with a red arrow next to it is a required field. Everything else is optional at this point. Before you finalize it, you will have to enter in the contract completion dates and the final construction value. But when you're first entering the data, you don't have to enter that at that time. So adding subcontractors, once you've added that subcontractor, the 0 is the prime on this tier column over here. 1 is a subcontractor, so that's the sub to S&J Construction, Melissa's Construction. And it's possible for the subcontractor to also have subcontractors. So if Melissa's Construction wanted to subcontract some electrical work, there would be a tier 2 item under there. And there's actually, you would click add subcontractor over here, and you wouldn't say, oh, it's tier 2. It just depends on you adding the subcontractor under Melissa's Construction. That would trigger the system to know that that's going to be a tier 2 vendor. And you would enter in all the same kinds of information about that tier 2 vendor. We're going to look at the project view for formal and informal projects here. And it shows all the data that you've entered here. And again, this isn't a screen where you could enter data. It's just about looking at it and saying, did I enter in everything I need to? Is there a blank somewhere that I need to be aware of? Like, we're almost ready to finalize it, but we don't have a final dollar value or a completion date. You would need to go back in and clarify those things before you moved on. And once you're ready to finalize it, you think, hey, I think I've entered in everything that I need to. I'm ready to get this off my desk. Go to finalize form, and we're going to finalize those. You go to finalize project tab. Once you click on that, it will bring up any errors that it recognizes and give you the opportunity to say what error page it was, what's the field that has the problem, what's the value that it sees, and what the error is. So I can understand that after doing a whole lot of data entry in here, you get to this screen and you're like, I have how many errors? Oh my gosh, this is terrible. But this is a helpful screen in that it tells you where the problem is. It tells you what the problem is. and the value associated with it. So this first one, the main project page, is the problem where it's going to be. The field is the final construction value, and it says right now the 0 is the dollar value for final construction, and this field must be greater than 0 for project finalization. So you would have to have paid something out for the construction contract, and it would need to be entered in here. And it also needs to match what shows up in the contracts area for the final contract value. So clicking on this link will take you directly to where the problem is, and you can work on that problem, fix it, save it, and come back here, and it will say, it will take off one that you just fixed. So as you fix them, this list will get smaller and smaller. One of the benefits of that list is if you are just looking at it and it's just mind-boggling and you're like, I don't know what to do with this, you can take a screenshot of this and email it to Roxanne Waller, email it to me, and we can take a look at it and say, oh, okay, I see what's going on here. Let's have a Teams meeting. We'll share screens, and you can go through and we can guide you on how to make the error correction. So this is literally my favorite screen in all of HUBSCO Plus because I like to help people and I like to help them feel like they've made progress and fix what they need to. So I find this very valuable when people share this with us. Screenshot is a great thing to get of this and to send to us. Okay, just making sure I didn't miss anything on here. That's good. Finalizing the formal and informal projects. Once you've get to finalize the project, you'll select finalize project. If you've created, if all the errors are done, it'll give you this view that looks just like the project view. You'll be able to scroll through it and say, yeah, I think that's right. And you'll, down at the bottom, you'll select finalize project, and it will, there's no option to return to edit the project after that. So once you finalize the project, it's done. We can unfinalize it for you if you find out, oh no, there was another vendor, we need to add them. We can do that. You just have to contact us, let us know the project number, project name, and we can unfinalize it for you, but you can't do that on your own. And once you get to the finalized project, it will say, once you hit finalize project on that previous screen, it will show you this screen. And this screen will go away and never be seen again after you navigate away from it. So I highly recommend printing it out or keeping a screenshot and putting it with the rest of your project information. So you've got proof, hey, I submitted this in HUBSCO. This was the date that I submitted on. You can see it shows my name right here. It shows the date right here and our organization. So that's kind of proof for you that for this project up here, it was submitted. And again, you can't return to this after you've done it. You can't go back and change something once it's been finalized. Take a screenshot of this and make sure to keep your documentation for at least 3 years. So there are some reports available, and please, it's been kind of quiet in here, and you're just listening to my voice going on and on and on. If you have some questions, feel free to ask them. And I get it. Some people have some very specific things, and they might not be ready to share them in front of everybody. So we do usually have some folks who hold on to the end with very specific questions, and that's fine. Just wanted to see if we had general questions that might apply to other folks. Other folks may have those questions, didn't know how to verbalize it, or were a little shy in asking. So you could be helping somebody else and help yourself at the same time. So the reports, if you come to, when you're navigating in HUBSCO Plus, up at this top blue bar, hover over the report word, and then you select your report that you want. there are annual quarterly totals that you can select. You can look at the total construction dollars per construction method, and you can do total construction dollars per type of work. There actually may be a couple of new ones in there that would allow you to see vendors and projects, a project listing as well. That's been added so that we can see it. I'm not totally sure if that has migrated into everybody being able to pull those kinds of reports. There's no reason you shouldn't be able to see it. It could be just as valuable for you as it is for us, but you may want to check that out. So here's the report, annual quarterly reports total. So you'd go in and your public entity will populate here. You choose your fiscal year and you use the 4-digit fiscal year that's at the end of the fiscal year. So if you say fiscal year 22-23, covering July 1, 2022 through June 30th, 2023, in this field right here, you would type 2023. For the current fiscal year that we're in right now, you would type 2025. And then you can select either the default is all, so it's like an annual report, or you can select it quarter by quarter. You can choose either construction or design. And you can also choose either all projects, formal projects, or informal projects. It just depends on what your need and your interest is. And it will provide a report and it will give your totals down at the bottom, which will be based on your construction spending. The design spending won't, unless you selected design as your contract type, design will not be part of the calculation of the percentage. And if you select the type of work report, it will list like, here's concrete, conveying systems, door systems, electrical, and it will be able to show you where all the spending by hub category was, as well as the overall spend in those areas too. So you can see that if you need to. And you can also see it by the type of construction method, single prime, CMR. It will be able to tell you that. And it will tell you the primes as well as the different tiers that were used. Any questions about reports?
Hi, John, not reports particularly. My question is, how long does the HUBSCO application itself take to be approved?
When you mean approved, what do you mean by that?
So to use the actual tool, you fill out the application, right? And then how long does it take before you can start using the system?
Oh, typically, I mean, it could be the same day that you submit that. It just depends on what work we have going on in the office. If it's already an established account, like Town of Holly Springs, if they wanted an account, if they've already got one, adding a new user is super easy. You just tell us who the person is, their first and last name, phone number, and email, and whether you want them to just enter and pull data or you want them to be a system administrator. So that's really all we need to know if we're just adding a new user. And that could just take a few minutes to enter in. If it's in a new account, it takes a little bit more time. But I mean, typically, if you let us know, hey, I have a new account, there's actually a form for entering that information in that we need for that, and then we'll be able to take that and populate it. It's probably going to be a day or two from that point, but it's not going to be for a really long time.
Okay, thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, all right, yep. And as soon as we enter in somebody as a user, we send them an email that says, hey, you've been entered as a user, here's your ID, and we'll give them resources like a link to the video, like the PDF of the presentation slides. So they've got that information as basics that they can get going on. All right. So just going to go through a few resources here. And these are links, trainings, and resources. So if you're a new user, you would request access here. If you forgot your login ID, you can email us at hubsco@doa.nc.gov. That doesn't go to a individual, that goes to our mailbox for HUBSCO, so that if I'm out, then Leslie could view it or Roxanne could view it and could answer questions that come in there. Here's HUBSCO Plus. That's the link to actually log in. Here's some training resources, a little bit of welcome, informal project training. There's a project checklist for both informal projects and formal projects that goes through and shows what fields there are for each of those types of projects, which could be helpful in gathering information before you sit down and log into HUBSCO Plus to make sure that you've got what you need to make it an efficient process of data entry. And it also indicates which fields are required fields. So that could be helpful as well. And there's also, it's a bit older, but it's a hub construction requirements presentation. And there's an example of some good faith efforts when you're looking at affidavits, what things you might consider in terms of documentation, accepting it from bidders and saying, okay, that's what they submitted for their good faith effort documentation. Generally speaking, if they meet the goal, they don't, the assumption is that they did their good faith efforts. So you wouldn't necessarily require them to submit all their documentation for that. But if they did not meet their goal on a formal project, then they would need to submit everything that they put on affidavit A saying that they did that. They would have to be able to document what they did to reach those vendors. There's also Hub annual and detailed reports. So that's construction, design, goods and services, and the Hub construction expenditure reporting page. Those are all resources that you can use. And if anybody wants me to show them where those things are on the website, I could do that if you want. Does anybody have any questions at this point? Okay. All right. Well, if you need to get in touch with us, the phone number for the office here is 984-236-0130. And the HUBSCO email address is HUBSCO, HUBSCO, at doa.nc.gov.